I thought my husband was working late to secure our dream home. Then I discovered he was actually planning to steal my inheritance with his mistress and leave me with nothing. So I disappeared completely, taking everything they thought they could steal, and watched their perfect scheme crumble from a distance they never saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning that would shatter my world began with what I believed was a gesture of love. My husband Marcus had left a handwritten note on my pillow, his familiar scrawl promising that all his recent long hours at the law firm were for us, for our future, for the life we had been building together over 8 years of marriage. Elena, my darling, the note read, I know I have been distant lately, but everything I am doing is to secure the foundation we need for our next chapter. Trust me when I say that very soon, we will have everything we have ever dreamed of. Your patience means the world to me. I folded the note carefully and placed it in the jewelry box my grandmother had given me, alongside other mementos from our relationship. At 34, I had learned to treasure these small tokens of affection from Marcus, especially during the periods when his demanding career as a corporate attorney consumed most of his attention and energy. Our home in the affluent Riverside Heights neighborhood reflected the success Marcus had achieved in his legal practice. The Georgian-style house featured soaring ceilings, hardwood floors that gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered views of manicured gardens and the distant mountains. Every detail had been carefully selected to project prosperity and refinement, from the imported marble countertops to the hand-painted wallpaper in the formal dining room. My own career as a freelance graphic designer had flourished over the past 3 years, allowing me to work from the sunlit studio Marcus had created for me in the converted conservatory. My client list included several high-profile marketing agencies and boutique businesses that valued my expertise in brand development and visual storytelling. The work provided not only creative fulfillment, but also financial independence that complemented Marcus's substantial earnings from his law practice. The morning routine that had become our pattern over recent months involved Marcus leaving the house before dawn for what he described as crucial case preparation, while I began my day reviewing client projects and managing deadlines from my home studio. We would reconnect briefly through text messages during the day, sharing updates about meetings, deadlines, and evening plans that increasingly seemed to accommodate his unpredictable schedule. Our social circle consisted primarily of other professional couples from Marcus's law firm and the country club, where we maintained membership. These relationships provided pleasant dinner party conversations and networking opportunities, but I had begun to notice that many of our interactions felt performative rather than genuinely intimate. We presented the image of a successful couple who had achieved the American dream of professional accomplishment and material comfort. The subtle changes in Marcus's behavior over the past 6 months had registered in my consciousness, but had not triggered serious concern. His increased preoccupation with his phone, the frequency of evening meetings that required his attendance, and the growing distance in our physical intimacy had seemed consistent with the demands of his expanding legal practice. When I occasionally expressed concern about the time we were spending apart, Marcus would reassure me with explanations about important cases and career opportunities that would benefit our long-term security. The inheritance that would soon become central to our story had arrived 3 months earlier, following the death of my great-aunt Catherine, a woman I had barely known but who had apparently followed my life and career with interest. The bequest included a substantial sum of money, approximately $250,000, along with a portfolio of investments and a small property in the mountains that had been in our family for generations. Marcus had been surprisingly enthusiastic about the inheritance, immediately suggesting that we should consolidate the funds with our existing savings to make strategic investments in real estate and business opportunities. His expertise in financial law, he argued, would enable us to maximize the potential of this unexpected windfall and accelerate our timeline for achieving complete financial independence. I had agreed to allow Marcus to manage the legal and financial aspects of the inheritance, trusting his professional judgment and appreciating his willingness to handle the complex paperwork and investment decisions. The funds had been transferred to accounts that Marcus established specifically for this purpose, with the understanding that we would make joint decisions about major expenditures and investment strategies. The morning of my discovery began with what seemed like a routine client meeting scheduled for 10 o'clock at the offices of Meridian Marketing, one of my most important accounts. The agency had requested a presentation of logo concepts for a new restaurant chain, and I had spent the previous week developing several design alternatives that I believed would exceed their expectations and potentially lead to additional contract opportunities. I arrived at the Meridian offices 15 minutes early, carrying my portfolio and laptop in the leather messenger bag that Marcus had given me for my birthday. The receptionist, a young woman named Jessica whom I had come to know through previous visits, greeted me with unusual enthusiasm and what seemed like barely contained excitement about something unrelated to my scheduled appointment. "Elena, I am so glad to see you," Jessica said, her voice carrying an undertone that I could not immediately interpret. "I hope you do not mind me asking, but are you related to the Elena Vasquez who inherited property from Catherine Moreau recently? I saw something about it in the legal notices section of the newspaper, and I thought the name seemed familiar." The question struck me as both personal and oddly specific. Legal notices about inheritance matters were typically formal announcements that attracted little attention from the general public, and I was surprised that Jessica would have noticed or remembered such details from routine newspaper content. "Yes, that was my great-aunt," I replied carefully, uncertain about why this information would be relevant to someone I knew only through professional interactions. It was quite unexpected, since I had not maintained close contact with that side of my family. Jessica's expression shifted in ways that seemed to reflect internal conflict about whether to continue the conversation. She glanced around the reception area, confirming that we were alone, before leaning forward with the conspiratorial posture of someone preparing to share sensitive information. "Elena, I probably should not be telling you this, but I overheard something yesterday that I think you should know about," Jessica said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "My boyfriend works at Hartwell Spencer & Associates, the law firm downtown, and he mentioned overhearing conversations about inheritance manipulation and asset transfer strategies that involved your name specifically." The words hit me like a physical blow, completely unexpected and immediately alarming. Marcus worked at Hartwell Spencer & Associates, and the idea that my inheritance was being discussed in professional contexts without my knowledge suggested circumstances that I had never considered possible. "What exactly did he hear?" I asked, maintaining composure while my heart rate accelerated and my mind began calculating the implications of Jessica's revelation. Jessica looked around the reception area again before responding, clearly uncomfortable with the position she had placed herself in by initiating this conversation. "He said there were discussions about legal strategies for transferring inherited assets and something about timing that needed to be coordinated with personal relationship changes. Elena, he specifically mentioned your husband's name in connection with these conversations." The meeting with Meridian Marketing proceeded as scheduled, but I found myself struggling to maintain focus on logo presentations and design concepts while processing the implications of Jessica's information. My client seemed pleased with the preliminary concepts, but I left the office with the unsettling awareness that my personal life might contain deceptions that I had never suspected. The drive home provided time to consider various explanations for what Jessica had reported, ranging from innocent professional discussions about estate planning to more troubling possibilities involving deliberate manipulation or concealment. I recognized that secondhand information could be incomplete or misinterpreted, but the specificity of the details suggested that something significant was occurring without my knowledge or participation. Marcus's car was not in our driveway when I arrived home, which was consistent with his recent pattern of extended absences during daytime hours. I entered our house through the garage entrance, immediately noticing that his briefcase and jacket were not in their usual location by the door, suggesting that he had not returned home since leaving that morning. The decision to examine Marcus's home office was not premeditated, but arose from a combination of curiosity and growing concern about the information Jessica had shared. His office occupied a formal room on the first floor, featuring built-in bookcases, a mahogany desk, and filing cabinets that contained both his professional documents and our personal financial records. The desk surface appeared unusually organized, with documents arranged in neat stacks and file folders labeled with what seemed like deliberately generic descriptions, such as investment planning and asset management. I opened the center drawer, looking for anything that might provide context for the conversations Jessica had reported. The discovery that would change everything was tucked beneath a stack of legal pads in the bottom drawer of Marcus's desk. A manila folder labeled EV Estate Planning contained documents that I immediately recognized as related to my inheritance, but the content revealed planning and strategies that had never been discussed with me. The first document was a detailed analysis of my great-aunt's bequest, including valuations of the property and investments that were significantly higher than the figures Marcus had shared with me. According to this analysis, the total value of my inheritance exceeded $400,000, nearly double what I had been told. The second document was a timeline outlining steps for asset transfer and account consolidation, with target dates for moving funds into accounts that I did not recognize and had never authorized. The timeline indicated that these transfers were scheduled to be completed within the next 2 weeks. The third document was a copy of a legal form that appeared to grant Marcus power of attorney over my inherited assets, complete with what looked like my signature at the bottom. I stared at this signature for several minutes, recognizing that while it resembled my handwriting, I had no memory of signing any such document. The final document in the folder was a letter drafted on Marcus's law firm letterhead, addressed to the executor of my great-aunt's estate, requesting expedited processing of asset transfers and confirming authorization for Marcus to act on my behalf in all matters related to the inheritance. The letter was dated for the following week and awaited only Marcus's signature before being sent. I photographed each document with my phone, ensuring that I had clear images of every page and detail. The evidence painted a picture of systematic deception involving forged signatures, undisclosed asset valuations, and unauthorized legal representations that constituted serious violations of both professional ethics and criminal law. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The sound of Marcus's car in the driveway interrupted my examination of his files, forcing me to quickly return everything to its original position and exit his office before he entered the house. I retreated to my studio, attempting to appear engaged in normal work activities while processing the magnitude of what I had discovered. Marcus entered the house with his usual cheerful demeanor, calling out greetings and asking about my day as if nothing had changed. His performance of normalcy felt grotesque given what I now knew about his activities and intentions, but I managed to respond with appropriate pleasantries while internally calculating my next steps. "How was your day, darling?" Marcus asked, appearing in my studio doorway with the smile that had once made me feel loved and protected, but now seemed calculated and manipulative. "Productive," I replied, maintaining eye contact while my mind raced through the implications of his question. Did he know that I had been in his office? Was he testing my knowledge of his activities? The Meridian presentation went well, and I think we will receive approval for the next phase of the project. "That is wonderful news," Marcus said, his tone carrying what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. "Your talent continues to amaze me, and I am so proud of everything you are accomplishing with your business." The compliment felt like another layer of deception, praise designed to maintain my trust while he systematically stole my inheritance and planned what I was beginning to suspect might be the end of our marriage. I smiled and thanked him, playing my part in the charade while planning my response to his betrayal. The evening proceeded with what had become our typical routine of separate activities in the same house. Marcus disappeared into his office to work on what he described as urgent legal briefs, while I remained in my studio, ostensibly working on client projects but actually researching legal remedies for inheritance fraud and identity theft. The information I found was both encouraging and alarming. Marcus's actions appeared to constitute multiple felonies, including forgery, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty that could result in criminal prosecution and professional disbarment. However, the complexity of proving these crimes and recovering stolen assets could involve lengthy legal proceedings that might be expensive and emotionally devastating. As I sat in my studio that evening, surrounded by the tools of my trade and the life I had built with Marcus, I realized that my world had fundamentally changed in the space of a single afternoon. The man I had trusted with my heart, my home, and my financial security was systematically betraying that trust for his own benefit. The note he had left that morning, promising that everything he was doing was for our future, now read like a confession of his crimes wrapped in the language of love and devotion. His recent behavior, which I had attributed to professional stress and career ambition, was actually the methodical execution of a plan to steal my inheritance and, I was beginning to suspect, abandon our marriage once he had secured the assets he wanted. The discovery had transformed me from a trusting wife into someone who understood that her survival depended on her ability to think strategically and act decisively. The perfect life we appeared to have built together was revealed as an elaborate illusion designed to facilitate his theft of my family's legacy. Marcus's conspiracy was sophisticated and calculating, but he had made the critical error of underestimating my intelligence and resilience. His plan depended on my continued ignorance and trust, but now that I understood his intentions, I had the opportunity to turn his own strategy against him. The woman who went to sleep that night was fundamentally different from the one who had awakened that morning reading his loving note. I had discovered not only his betrayal, but also my own capacity for strategic thinking and decisive action that would soon prove more powerful than his legal expertise and criminal intentions. If you believe in the power of truth and the strength that comes from discovering your own resilience, subscribe now to support more stories of women who refuse to be victims of deception and betrayal. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of my transformation from deceived wife to strategic opponent, and Marcus had no idea that his carefully planned conspiracy was about to become the foundation of his own destruction. The following morning brought a revelation that would transform my understanding of Marcus's betrayal from opportunistic theft to a comprehensive conspiracy involving multiple participants and carefully orchestrated deception. The discovery began with what appeared to be a routine phone call but evolved into evidence of planning that extended far beyond my inheritance and into the systematic dismantling of our entire marriage. I had awakened at 5:30, 2 hours before Marcus typically stirred, and used the quiet time to develop a strategy for investigating his activities without alerting him to my growing suspicions. The previous evening had been spent researching legal procedures for inheritance fraud and identity theft, but I recognized that understanding the full scope of his conspiracy would require more comprehensive investigation than document examination alone could provide. The landline in our kitchen rang at 6:15, an unusual occurrence since most of our personal and professional contacts used our mobile phones for communication. Marcus remained asleep upstairs, and I answered the call expecting to hear from a client or service provider who had obtained our home number through business directories. "Good morning, this is Amanda calling from Pinnacle Real Estate Services," the voice said with professional courtesy. "I am calling to confirm the property viewing appointment scheduled for this afternoon at 2 o'clock for the Riverside Heights listing. Will both Mr. and Mrs. Richardson be attending the showing?" The name Richardson struck me as completely unfamiliar, and I realized immediately that the caller had reached an incorrect number or was seeking people who did not live at our address. However, the reference to Riverside Heights, our own neighborhood, suggested that the mistake might be more complex than simple misdirected communication. "I believe you may have reached the wrong number," I replied carefully. "There are no Richardsons at this address, and we have not scheduled any property viewings." Amanda's response revealed confusion that seemed genuine rather than scripted. "I apologize for the confusion, but I have Marcus Richardson and Elena Richardson listed as my 2 o'clock appointment for the property at 847 Maple Grove Lane. The appointment was scheduled through our online system yesterday evening, and confirmation was sent to the email address provided." The use of my first name in connection with the surname Richardson created an entirely new dimension of concern. Marcus's surname was Castellanos, and I had retained my maiden name of Vasquez throughout our marriage. The idea that someone was scheduling property viewings using my name with an incorrect surname suggested identity theft or impersonation that extended beyond inheritance fraud. "Could you please provide me with the email address that was used to schedule this appointment?" I asked, maintaining professional courtesy while my mind raced through the implications of this development. "Certainly." The appointment was made using the email address marcusrichardson.law@gmail.com, and the contact information included this phone number, along with a mobile number that I can provide if needed. The email address was completely unfamiliar to me, but the inclusion of legal terminology suggested connection to Marcus's professional activities. The use of Richardson as a surname in both the email address and appointment scheduling indicated deliberate identity creation rather than simple error or confusion. I obtained the mobile number from Amanda and confirmed the appointment details, including the specific property address and the names listed for the viewing. After ending the call, I immediately searched online for information about the Maple Grove Lane property and discovered that it was a luxury home priced at nearly $2 million, far exceeding the value of our current residence and requiring substantial financial resources for purchase. The discovery of the Richardson identity prompted me to conduct more comprehensive searches of Marcus's activities and communications. Using techniques I had learned through my graphic design work with security-conscious clients, I began examining our shared computer for recently accessed websites, email accounts, and document files that might provide additional information about his activities. The search revealed a browser history that had been partially cleared but still contained fragments of activity from the previous week. Among the remaining entries were multiple visits to real estate websites, luxury property listings, and financial services companies that specialized in wealth management and asset protection strategies. More significantly, I discovered evidence of recently accessed email accounts that I had never seen before, including the marcusrichardson.law@gmail.com address that Amanda had mentioned. While I could not access these accounts directly, the browser's autofill suggestions revealed additional email addresses and usernames that suggested Marcus had created an entire alternative identity for conducting activities he wanted to keep hidden from me. The investigation expanded when I realized that Marcus's manipulation of my inheritance might be connected to broader financial planning that involved our joint assets and future earning potential. I accessed our shared financial accounts using login credentials that Marcus had provided for household budgeting purposes, discovering transactions and transfers that had not been discussed or authorized. The bank records revealed a pattern of systematic asset movement that had been occurring over the past 3 months, coinciding precisely with the timeline of my inheritance. Funds had been transferred from our joint savings account into individual accounts that bore only Marcus's name, with transaction descriptions that suggested investment activities and business expenses that had never been mentioned in our financial discussions. The total amount of these transfers exceeded $50,000, representing nearly half of our combined savings and including money that I had contributed through my graphic design business over the past 2 years. The transfers had been structured in amounts just below the threshold that would trigger automatic reporting requirements, suggesting sophisticated understanding of banking regulations and deliberate intent to avoid detection. The most disturbing discovery was a series of transfers scheduled for the following week that would move the remaining funds from our joint accounts into accounts that I could not access. These scheduled transactions would effectively leave me without access to any of our shared financial resources at the same time that Marcus was planning to complete the theft of my inheritance. The coordination between these various financial activities revealed a level of planning and systematic deception that extended far beyond opportunistic theft. Marcus had been methodically positioning himself to control all of our shared assets while simultaneously stealing my inherited wealth, creating a situation where I would be left with no financial resources and no legal recourse. The phone call from Amanda had inadvertently revealed another dimension of his planning that involved establishing new identities and potentially relocating to a different area with stolen assets. The property viewing scheduled for that afternoon suggested that Marcus was preparing to purchase expensive real estate using funds he was stealing from me, creating a new life foundation built entirely on fraudulent activity. I spent the remainder of the morning documenting everything I had discovered, creating detailed records of bank transfers, email addresses, property appointments, and the timeline of activities that revealed the comprehensive nature of Marcus's conspiracy. The evidence painted a picture of systematic financial fraud, combined with identity theft and advanced planning for what appeared to be abandonment of our marriage once he had secured the assets he wanted. The psychological impact of these discoveries was profound and transformative. The previous day had revealed Marcus's betrayal of my trust and theft of my inheritance, but today's investigation had shown that his deception encompassed our entire relationship and financial future. He was not simply stealing money. He was systematically destroying the foundation of our life together while preparing to disappear with everything we had built. However, the comprehensiveness of Marcus's planning also revealed vulnerabilities in his strategy that I could potentially exploit. His reliance on forged documents, false identities, and scheduled transactions created evidence trails that could be used against him in legal proceedings. His assumption that I would remain ignorant of his activities until after they were completed gave me time to develop counter-strategies that could protect my assets and expose his crimes. The discovery of the Richardson identity provided particularly valuable intelligence because it revealed that Marcus was planning activities under false names that could be monitored and potentially disrupted. The property viewing scheduled for that afternoon represented an opportunity to gather additional information about his plans while potentially documenting his use of fraudulent identity for illegal purposes. At 11 o'clock, I received a text message from Marcus indicating that he would be working late at the office and would not be home until after 8 o'clock that evening. The message provided me with an opportunity to conduct additional investigation of his activities without risk of discovery, while also confirming that he had no knowledge of my growing awareness of his conspiracy. I used the afternoon to conduct comprehensive research on the legal and practical aspects of financial fraud, identity theft, and asset recovery. The information I gathered was both encouraging and sobering, revealing that while Marcus's activities constituted serious crimes with significant penalties, the process of proving these crimes and recovering stolen assets could be complex and time-consuming. The research also revealed that timing would be crucial in any legal response to Marcus's activities. Once he succeeded in transferring assets and potentially relocating under false identity, recovery could become significantly more difficult and expensive. The window of opportunity for preventing his theft and exposing his crimes was rapidly closing, requiring decisive action within the next few days. At 2 o'clock, I made a decision that would provide crucial intelligence about Marcus's plans, while demonstrating my growing commitment to strategic rather than passive response to his betrayal. I drove to the Maple Grove Lane property where Marcus had scheduled the viewing under the Richardson identity, positioning myself where I could observe without being detected. The luxury home was situated in an exclusive neighborhood that featured custom-built residences with extensive landscaping and privacy features. I parked across the street with a clear view of the property entrance, using my graphic design equipment to photograph and document any activities that might provide evidence of Marcus's fraudulent identity use. At precisely 2 o'clock, Marcus arrived at the property driving a silver BMW that I had never seen before. He was accompanied by a woman whom I did not recognize, someone who appeared to be in her late 20s with blonde hair and professional attire that suggested business or legal background. The sight of Marcus with this unknown woman provided the final piece of evidence I needed to understand the complete scope of his betrayal. This was not simply financial fraud motivated by greed. This was a comprehensive plan to steal my assets, abandon our marriage, and establish a new life with another woman using the wealth he had stolen from me. I photographed Marcus and the woman as they met with the real estate agent and toured the property, documenting their interaction and his use of false identity for what was clearly a serious property acquisition discussion. The woman's familiarity with Marcus and her participation in the property viewing suggested that she was a willing participant in his conspiracy rather than an innocent victim of his deception. The property tour lasted approximately 45 minutes, during which I observed Marcus and the woman examining various aspects of the home and grounds with the attention of serious potential buyers. Their body language and interactions suggested intimate familiarity and shared planning that extended beyond casual acquaintance or professional relationship. When they concluded the property viewing, I followed their vehicles at a distance, discovering that they drove to an upscale restaurant in the downtown area, where they continued their discussion over what appeared to be a celebratory lunch. The woman's car bore a parking decal for Hartwell, Spencer & Associates, Marcus's law firm, confirming that she was a colleague who had access to professional resources and legal expertise that could facilitate their conspiracy. The observation of Marcus with his accomplice provided emotional clarity that complemented the financial evidence I had been gathering. His betrayal was not a momentary lapse in judgment or opportunistic crime. It was a calculated conspiracy involving another person who understood the legal and financial aspects of what they were planning together. However, the comprehensive nature of their planning also revealed the extent of their vulnerability to exposure and legal consequences. Their use of false identities, forged documents, and fraudulent financial transactions created multiple opportunities for criminal prosecution and civil liability that could result in imprisonment and complete financial ruin for both participants. I returned home that afternoon with complete understanding of the conspiracy I was facing and absolute clarity about the strategic response that would be required to protect myself and ensure that Marcus and his accomplice faced appropriate consequences for their crimes. The investigation had transformed me from a confused victim into someone with comprehensive intelligence about enemy activities and the determination to use that intelligence effectively. The woman who had answered Amanda's phone call that morning had been seeking confirmation of routine business activity. The woman who returned home that afternoon possessed detailed knowledge of a criminal conspiracy and the strategic mindset necessary to turn that conspiracy against its perpetrators. Marcus would return home that evening, expecting to find the same trusting wife who had believed his explanations and accepted his reassurances. Instead, he would be facing someone who understood every aspect of his betrayal and was prepared to respond with legal and strategic capabilities that would exceed his expectations and destroy the foundation of his criminal enterprise. The investigation phase of my response was complete. Tomorrow would begin the strategic implementation of countermeasures that would protect my assets, expose his crimes, and ensure that his conspiracy became the instrument of his own destruction rather than the foundation of his fraudulent new life. The transformation from victim to strategist required more than anger or determination. It demanded the systematic development of capabilities I had never needed before, combined with the careful cultivation of allies who could provide expertise and resources beyond my own knowledge. The morning after discovering Marcus with his accomplice marked the beginning of my evolution from someone who had been betrayed into someone who would orchestrate comprehensive justice. My first call was to Patricia Williams, my college roommate who had built a successful career as a forensic accountant specializing in financial fraud investigations. Patricia and I had maintained contact over the years through holiday cards and occasional social media interactions, but I had never needed to draw upon her professional expertise until now. The conversation would test whether our friendship could withstand the gravity of what I was about to request. "Elena, what a pleasant surprise to hear from you," Patricia said when she answered my call at 7:30 that morning. "I was just thinking about you last week when I saw some of your design work featured in that marketing magazine article." "Patricia, I need your help with something serious," I replied, abandoning any pretense of social conversation. "I have discovered that my husband is systematically stealing my inheritance through forged documents and fraudulent financial transactions. I need someone with your expertise to help me understand my options and develop a response strategy." The silence that followed my explanation lasted long enough for me to wonder if our connection had been lost. But Patricia's eventual response carried the focused intensity of someone who had encountered similar situations in her professional practice. "Elena, what you are describing constitutes multiple felonies that could result in significant prison time and professional disbarment for your husband," Patricia said, her tone shifting to the analytical approach she reserved for complex financial investigations. "Before we proceed with any discussion of response strategies, I need you to understand that you are potentially dealing with someone who has demonstrated willingness to commit serious crimes against you personally. Your safety needs to be our primary consideration." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with Patricia providing detailed guidance on evidence preservation, legal documentation requirements, and safety precautions that would protect me while I developed comprehensive response to Marcus's conspiracy. Her expertise revealed aspects of financial fraud investigation that I had not considered, including the importance of maintaining normal behavior patterns to avoid alerting perpetrators before evidence could be secured and legal proceedings initiated. Patricia agreed to review the evidence I had gathered and provide professional analysis of the financial transactions and fraudulent documents. More importantly, she offered to connect me with legal professionals who specialized in inheritance fraud and criminal financial crimes, ensuring that my response would have appropriate legal foundation and procedural correctness. "Elena, I want you to understand something crucial about your situation," Patricia said as our conversation concluded. "Your husband has made a critical error by underestimating your intelligence and resources. He has planned this conspiracy assuming that you would remain passive and uninformed until it was too late for you to respond effectively. That assumption will become the foundation of his downfall, but only if you maintain strategic discipline and avoid emotional reactions that could compromise your position. The second critical conversation occurred with Dr. James Hartley, my family physician, who had known me for over 6 years and could provide both medical and personal perspective on the stress and health implications of my situation. The call was motivated by Patricia's emphasis on maintaining my physical and mental health during what would inevitably be a prolonged and emotionally challenging process. Dr. Hartley, I am facing a personal crisis that involves significant betrayal and financial fraud by my husband, I explained during our phone consultation. I need medical guidance on managing stress and maintaining my health while I navigate legal proceedings and major life changes. Dr. Hartley's response demonstrated both professional concern and personal understanding of the psychological impact that betrayal can have on individuals who have trusted completely and been systematically deceived. Elena, what you are describing represents a form of psychological trauma that can have significant physical and emotional consequences, Dr. Hartley explained. The combination of betrayal, financial threat, and uncertainty about your future can create stress responses that affect everything from sleep patterns to immune system function. We need to develop strategies that will maintain your health and decision-making capacity throughout this process. The medical consultation resulted in practical recommendations for stress management, nutrition, exercise routines, and sleep hygiene that would support my physical and mental resilience during the challenging months ahead. Dr. Hartley also provided referrals to mental health professionals who specialized in trauma recovery and could provide emotional support without compromising my legal position. The third essential conversation was with Maria Santos, a private investigator who had been recommended by Patricia for her expertise in financial crimes and domestic investigation. Maria's background included 15 years with the State Attorney General's office investigating white-collar crime, followed by a decade of private practice specializing in cases involving marital fraud and asset concealment. Mrs. Vasquez, I have reviewed the preliminary information that Patricia shared with me, and I believe your situation requires comprehensive investigation that goes beyond financial records, Maria explained during our initial consultation. Your husband's use of false identity and apparent relocation planning suggests sophisticated criminal activity that may involve additional accomplices and hidden assets that have not yet been discovered. Maria's analysis revealed dimensions of Marcus's conspiracy that I had not fully considered, including the possibility that his activities extended beyond stealing my inheritance and might involve client funds from his law practice or other criminal enterprises that could affect the scope and timeline of legal proceedings. The involvement of his colleague from the law firm creates additional complications and opportunities, Maria continued. If she is participating in criminal activity using firm resources or client information, there may be professional liability and regulatory violations that could accelerate the consequences of their actions while providing additional avenues for asset recovery. The investigation proposal that Maria presented was comprehensive and systematic, involving financial record analysis, surveillance activities, communication monitoring, and coordination with law enforcement agencies that could provide resources and authority beyond what private investigation could achieve. The scope of her proposed investigation would provide complete intelligence about Marcus's activities while building the foundation for criminal prosecution and civil asset recovery. The fourth crucial conversation occurred with attorney Rachel Morrison, a legal professional who specialized in inheritance law and financial fraud cases. Rachel's expertise would provide the legal framework necessary to protect my rights, while ensuring that Marcus and his accomplice faced appropriate criminal and civil consequences for their actions. Elena, based on the evidence you have described, your husband has committed multiple serious crimes that carry significant prison sentences and financial penalties, Rachel explained during our consultation. However, the strength of your legal position depends on the quality of evidence we can present and the timing of our legal actions relative to his ongoing criminal activities. Rachel's analysis revealed that the forged power of attorney documents alone constituted multiple felonies, while the unauthorized financial transfers and identity theft created additional criminal charges that could result in decades of imprisonment. The involvement of his law firm colleague added conspiracy charges and professional liability issues that could affect multiple careers and institutional reputations. The most important decision you need to make is whether to pursue immediate legal action to freeze assets and prevent further theft, or whether to allow his criminal activities to continue while we gather additional evidence that could result in more comprehensive prosecution, Rachel explained. Each approach has advantages and risks that need to be carefully considered based on your priorities and risk tolerance. The legal consultation revealed that my situation provided multiple strategic options, ranging from immediate intervention to prevent asset theft to comprehensive criminal prosecution that could result in complete asset recovery and lengthy prison sentences for both participants in the conspiracy. The choice between these approaches would determine not only the outcome of my case, but also the timeline and emotional demands of the legal process. By noon, I had assembled a professional team, with the expertise and resources necessary to respond comprehensively to Marcus's conspiracy. Patricia would provide forensic accounting analysis and expert testimony regarding the financial crimes. Maria would conduct investigation activities that would reveal the complete scope of the conspiracy and identify all participants and hidden assets. Rachel would coordinate legal proceedings and ensure that my rights were protected while Marcus and his accomplice faced appropriate consequences. The afternoon was spent developing the operational framework for my response strategy, including communication protocols, evidence security procedures, and timeline coordination that would ensure maximum effectiveness while minimizing risk to my safety and legal position. The planning process revealed the complexity of responding to sophisticated criminal activity while maintaining the appearance of normal daily life. The most challenging aspect of the strategy development was the recognition that I would need to continue living with Marcus and maintaining our normal relationship patterns while systematically building the case against him. This requirement demanded psychological strength and strategic discipline that would test every aspect of my character and resilience. Elena, you need to understand that you are essentially becoming an undercover operative in your own home, Maria explained during our strategy session. Your safety depends on Marcus remaining unaware of your knowledge and activities until we are ready to proceed with legal action. This means maintaining normal behavior patterns while documenting his criminal activities and building our case. The psychological demands of this approach were significant, requiring me to interact normally with someone I now knew was systematically betraying and stealing from me. The emotional challenge was compounded by the need to maintain professional relationships and social interactions that might provide Marcus with information about my activities or emotional state. However, the strategic advantages of this approach were substantial. Continued access to Marcus's activities and communications would provide ongoing intelligence about his plans and timeline. Maintaining normal relationship patterns would prevent him from accelerating his criminal activities or implementing emergency measures that could complicate asset recovery. Most importantly, allowing his conspiracy to continue while building our case would provide comprehensive evidence that could result in maximum criminal penalties and complete asset recovery. The evening brought the first test of my ability to maintain normal behavior while harboring complete knowledge of Marcus's betrayal. He returned home at 8:15, carrying flowers and wearing the apologetic expression that had become familiar during recent months when his work schedule had prevented normal interaction. Elena, I am sorry that I have been so distracted lately, Marcus said, presenting the flowers with what appeared to be genuine affection. The cases I am working on require intensive preparation, but I want you to know that everything I am doing is for our future together. The words that had once provided comfort and reassurance now sounded like confessions of criminal intent, wrapped in declarations of love. I accepted the flowers and thanked him with appropriate warmth, internally marveling at his ability to maintain the pretense of devoted husband, while systematically stealing my inheritance and planning to abandon our marriage. I understand that your work is demanding, I replied, maintaining eye contact, while my newly developed strategic mindset analyzed his words for additional intelligence about his activities and timeline. I appreciate everything you are doing, and I am proud of your dedication to providing security for our future. The conversation continued with what had become our typical evening routine of sharing information about our respective days while watching television and preparing for bed. Marcus appeared relaxed and satisfied, apparently confident that his conspiracy was proceeding according to plan, without any awareness of my growing knowledge or developing response strategy. However, I noticed subtle changes in his behavior that suggested possible concern about maintaining his deception. His phone usage had become more secretive, with frequent checks of messages and calls taken in private areas of the house. His physical intimacy had decreased further, with explanations about stress and fatigue that seemed designed to minimize emotional connection, that might complicate his planned abandonment. Most significantly, his questions about my daily activities had become more frequent and detailed, suggesting possible concern about my awareness of his activities or suspicion about changes in my behavior patterns. These subtle interrogations required careful responses that provided reassuring information without revealing the strategic intelligence I was developing. The psychological challenge of maintaining normal interaction with Marcus while knowing the complete scope of his betrayal was profound and transformative. Each conversation required strategic thinking about information management and emotional control that was developing capabilities I had never needed before. The experience was simultaneously exhausting and empowering, revealing reserves of strength and intelligence that I had not previously recognized in myself. As I prepared for bed that evening, I reflected on the remarkable transformation that had occurred in my life over the past 3 days. The woman who had awakened Monday morning reading Marcus's loving note had been trusting, dependent, and focused on maintaining relationship harmony. The woman preparing for sleep Wednesday evening possessed comprehensive intelligence about a criminal conspiracy, professional allies with expertise in financial fraud investigation, and a strategic mindset capable of orchestrating complex legal and investigative responses. The change was not simply about knowledge or circumstances. It represented a fundamental shift in my understanding of my own capabilities and resilience. The betrayal that was intended to destroy my financial security and emotional stability had instead revealed strengths and resources that would enable me to achieve justice, while building a foundation for independence and success that exceeded anything I had previously imagined. Marcus's conspiracy had been designed to exploit my trust and dependency, while providing him with stolen wealth and freedom to pursue his new relationship. Instead, his criminal activities had become the catalyst for my transformation into someone with the knowledge, allies, and determination necessary to ensure that his betrayal became the foundation of his own comprehensive destruction. The strategic planning phase was complete. Tomorrow would begin the systematic implementation of countermeasures that would protect my assets, document his crimes, and ensure that justice was served with precision and completeness that would exceed his worst expectations. The implementation of my counter-strategy required the delicate balance of maintaining normal domestic routines while systematically gathering evidence that would expose the full scope of Marcus's criminal enterprise. The challenge demanded not merely careful observation, but the development of sophisticated intelligence-gathering capabilities that would document his activities with precision sufficient for criminal prosecution and civil asset recovery. Thursday morning began with what appeared to be a routine breakfast conversation, but represented the first operational test of my ability to extract strategic information while maintaining the facade of unsuspecting wife. Marcus had received several text messages during the night, his phone buzzing with notifications that he checked immediately upon awakening, suggesting communications that required urgent attention or careful coordination. "Marcus, you seem particularly focused on your phone this morning," I observed while preparing coffee, employing the tone of mild curiosity that had characterized our interactions throughout our marriage. "Is there a significant development in one of your cases?" His response provided the first indication that my intelligence operation was yielding valuable information. "Actually, there are some time-sensitive matters involving estate planning and asset transfers that require careful coordination over the next few days," Marcus replied, his attention remaining focused on his phone screen. "I may need to work extended hours and attend meetings that were not originally scheduled." The reference to estate planning and asset transfers confirmed that the timeline for his theft of my inheritance was accelerating, potentially in response to external pressures or opportunities that had not been apparent in my previous investigation. The mention of unscheduled meetings suggested coordination with accomplices or professional services that would facilitate the completion of his criminal activities. "That sounds quite complex," I replied, maintaining supportive interest while internally processing the intelligence implications of his disclosure. "Will these matters affect our weekend plans, or should I expect that you will be available for the dinner party at the Mitchell residence on Saturday evening?" Marcus's hesitation before responding revealed additional information about his timeline and priorities. "I should be able to attend the dinner party, but there may be some last-minute scheduling conflicts that require flexibility," he said, his tone suggesting that social commitments had become secondary to his criminal activities. Elena, I want you to know that once these current matters are resolved, my schedule will return to normal, and we can focus more attention on our personal plans and future goals. The promise of future attention to personal plans carried particular significance given my knowledge of his conspiracy with his law firm colleague. His reference to resolution of current matters likely indicated completion of the asset theft and implementation of his plan to abandon our marriage, making his reassurances about future attention both deceptive and psychologically manipulative. After Marcus departed for his office, I initiated the first phase of systematic evidence collection that would document his criminal activities while he remained unaware of my knowledge or investigation. The approach required accessing his personal documents and communications without leaving traces that might alert him to my activities, demanding both technical skill and strategic timing that would ensure operational security. The examination of Marcus's home office revealed additional documents that had not been present during my initial investigation, suggesting that his criminal planning was advancing and requiring updated documentation or coordination materials. A new folder labeled Property Acquisition Timeline contained detailed schedules for financial transfers, legal document execution, and property closing procedures that provided comprehensive intelligence about the scope and timeline of his conspiracy. The property acquisition documents revealed that Marcus and his accomplice were planning to purchase not only the luxury residence I had observed them viewing, but also a second property in a resort community approximately 3 hours from our current location. The second property appeared to be intended as a vacation residence or potential relocation destination, suggesting that their post-theft planning included options for geographic distance from the scene of their crimes. The financial requirements for both property acquisitions exceeded $800,000, confirming that Marcus's theft was not limited to my inheritance, but included our joint assets and potentially additional funds from sources that had not yet been identified. The comprehensiveness of the financial planning suggested systematic embezzlement or fraud that extended beyond our personal relationship into his professional activities. Among the most significant discoveries was a detailed timeline showing that final asset transfers were scheduled for the following Tuesday, with property closings planned for the end of the following week. The timeline indicated that Marcus intended to complete his theft and disappear with his accomplice within 10 days, leaving me without financial resources or legal recourse if his plan succeeded. The urgency created by this timeline required immediate coordination with my professional team to accelerate our evidence-gathering activities and prepare for legal intervention that would prevent completion of his criminal activities. I contacted Patricia Williams to request emergency analysis of the financial documents I had discovered, emphasizing that immediate action might be necessary to prevent irreversible asset theft. Elena, the timeline you have described creates significant urgency for our response strategy, Patricia explained during our emergency consultation. If Marcus completes the planned asset transfers, recovery could become substantially more difficult and expensive, potentially requiring years of litigation with uncertain outcomes. Patricia's analysis confirmed that immediate legal intervention would be necessary to freeze assets and prevent completion of the planned theft. However, she also emphasized that premature legal action could compromise our ability to gather additional evidence and might allow Marcus to implement emergency measures that could complicate prosecution and asset recovery. We need to balance the risk of asset loss against the opportunity to document additional criminal activities that could result in more comprehensive prosecution, Patricia continued. The decision requires careful analysis of the evidence we currently possess versus the potential value of additional intelligence that might be obtained over the next few days. The strategic decision-making process was complicated by the emotional and psychological demands of continuing to live with Marcus while knowing that he was actively implementing plans to steal my inheritance and abandon our marriage. The psychological pressure was intensified by the recognition that each day of delay increased the risk of irreversible financial loss, while potentially providing evidence that could ensure more complete justice. I decided to implement an accelerated intelligence-gathering operation that would document Marcus's activities over the next 48 hours, while preparing for immediate legal intervention if circumstances required prevention of asset theft. The approach demanded sophisticated surveillance and evidence collection that would test every aspect of my developing strategic capabilities. The afternoon surveillance operation began when Marcus left his office for what his calendar indicated was a lunch meeting with clients. Using the surveillance techniques that Maria Santos had taught me, I followed his vehicle to an upscale restaurant in the financial district, positioning myself where I could observe his activities without detection. Marcus arrived at the restaurant and was joined by his law firm colleague and two additional individuals whom I did not recognize. The group appeared to be conducting serious business discussions over lunch, with documents and electronic devices suggesting professional consultation or planning activities that required privacy and careful coordination. I photographed the meeting participants and documented the duration and apparent nature of their discussions, noting that the conversation appeared intense and focused, rather than social or casual. The presence of additional participants suggested that Marcus's conspiracy involved more accomplices than I had previously identified, potentially including financial professionals or other legal experts who could facilitate complex asset transfers and identity creation. The surveillance operation continued when the group concluded their lunch meeting and traveled in separate vehicles to an office building that housed several financial services companies and investment management firms. The location suggested that their afternoon activities involved professional services related to asset management, investment planning, or financial transactions that required specialized expertise. Marcus and his primary accomplice entered the building together while the other participants remained in the parking area, apparently maintaining communication through mobile phones and coordinating activities that required precise timing or sequence. The coordination suggested sophisticated planning that extended beyond simple theft into complex financial manipulation that involved multiple professionals and institutional resources. After 45 minutes, Marcus and his accomplice emerged from the building carrying briefcases and wearing expressions that suggested successful completion of important business activities. They exchanged brief conversation with the other participants before departing in separate vehicles, maintaining the pattern of careful coordination and communication that had characterized their previous activities. The surveillance intelligence confirmed that Marcus's conspiracy was substantially more complex and involved significantly more participants than my initial investigation had revealed. The professional coordination and institutional resources being utilized suggested criminal activities that extended beyond personal betrayal into systematic financial fraud that could have implications for other victims and institutional liability. I returned home and immediately contacted Maria Santos to report the surveillance findings and request expansion of our investigation to identify the additional participants and understand the complete scope of the criminal enterprise. The intelligence suggested that Marcus's activities might involve client funds, professional misconduct, or institutional fraud that could provide additional avenues for prosecution and asset recovery. Elena, what you have observed suggests a sophisticated financial crime operation that may involve multiple victims and substantial criminal liability for all participants, Maria explained during our emergency consultation. We need to coordinate immediately with law enforcement agencies that have the resources and authority to investigate complex financial crimes and prevent completion of the planned activities. Maria's analysis confirmed that the scope of Marcus's conspiracy required federal law enforcement involvement, potentially including FBI financial crime units and federal prosecutors who specialized in complex fraud cases. The involvement of multiple professionals and institutional resources suggested criminal activities that exceeded the jurisdiction and resources of local law enforcement agencies. The evening brought the most challenging test of my psychological resilience and strategic discipline when Marcus returned home displaying unusual satisfaction and confidence about his recent activities. His demeanor suggested successful completion of important business matters, potentially indicating advancement of his criminal timeline that required immediate response from my professional team. Elena, I have some excellent news about our financial planning and investment opportunities, Marcus announced upon entering our home, his enthusiasm genuine despite the criminal nature of his activities. The legal and financial work I have been conducting has created opportunities that will provide substantial security and freedom for our future together. The irony of his announcement was profound, given that his financial planning involved stealing my inheritance and abandoning our marriage to establish a new life with his accomplice. His reference to our future together represented either complete psychological disconnection from reality or sophisticated manipulation designed to maintain my trust until his criminal activities were completed. That sounds wonderful, Marcus, I replied, maintaining enthusiastic support while internally processing the implications of his confidence and satisfaction. Can you share any details about these opportunities, or are they still in development stages that require confidentiality? Marcus's response provided crucial intelligence about his timeline and immediate plans. Most of the details are still confidential due to legal and professional requirements, but I can tell you that within the next week, we will have access to substantial financial resources that will enable us to pursue opportunities that were previously beyond our reach, he explained, his tone carrying conviction that suggested genuine belief in his future plans. The timeline confirmation indicated that Marcus believed his criminal activities would be completed successfully within the next week, potentially requiring immediate legal intervention to prevent irreversible asset theft. His confidence suggested that he had no awareness of my investigation or preparation of legal countermeasures, providing strategic advantage that needed to be preserved until optimal timing for legal action. The evening concluded with what had become our routine of separate activities in shared space, with Marcus focused on private communications and document review, while I maintained the appearance of normal work activities, while actually coordinating with my professional team about immediate response strategies and legal intervention timing. The intelligence operation had provided comprehensive understanding of Marcus's criminal activities, timeline, and accomplice network, while confirming that immediate legal action would be necessary to prevent completion of his theft. The evidence gathered over the past 4 days had documented multiple felonies involving sophisticated financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy that could result in decades of imprisonment for all participants. However, the most significant outcome of the intelligence operation was the complete transformation of my capabilities and strategic mindset. The woman who had discovered Marcus's initial betrayal 4 days earlier had been shocked and confused by evidence of theft and deception. The woman concluding the intelligence operation possessed comprehensive understanding of complex criminal activities, professional allies with specialized expertise, and strategic thinking capabilities that would enable systematic destruction of the conspiracy that had been designed to destroy her life. The psychological journey from trusting wife to strategic operative had revealed personal strengths and intellectual capabilities that I had never recognized or developed previously. The betrayal that was intended to leave me helpless and financially devastated had instead catalyzed the development of skills and relationships that would enable me to achieve justice, while building a foundation for independence and success that exceeded my previous aspirations. Marcus's conspiracy was sophisticated and well-planned, but it contained fundamental vulnerabilities that arose from his underestimation of my intelligence, and his assumption that I would remain passive until his criminal activities were completed. These assumptions had provided me with time and access necessary to build comprehensive evidence, while developing strategic capabilities that would soon prove superior to his legal expertise and criminal planning. The intelligence operation was complete. Tomorrow would begin the legal intervention phase that would freeze his assets, expose his crimes, and ensure that his conspiracy became the foundation of justice, rather than the instrument of theft and abandonment he had intended. The transition from intelligence gathering to legal intervention required precise coordination between multiple professionals and careful timing that would maximize evidence preservation while preventing irreversible asset theft. Friday morning marked the beginning of the most critical phase of my response strategy, where theoretical planning would transform into decisive action that would determine the ultimate outcome of my confrontation with Marcus's criminal conspiracy. The emergency meeting with my legal team convened at 7 o'clock in attorney Rachel Morrison's conference room, where Patricia Williams, Maria Santos, and Rachel herself had assembled comprehensive evidence files and legal documentation that would support immediate judicial intervention. The atmosphere carried the focused intensity of professionals preparing for complex litigation that would determine not only financial outcomes, but also criminal consequences for multiple defendants. Elena, the evidence we have compiled over the past 4 days provides overwhelming documentation of systematic financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy that constitutes multiple felonies, Rachel Morrison began, her presentation methodical and comprehensive. The forged power of attorney documents alone carry potential sentences of 10 to 15 years in federal prison, while the asset theft and identity fraud add additional decades to potential criminal penalties. The legal analysis revealed that Marcus's activities had violated numerous federal and state laws, creating multiple avenues for prosecution and civil recovery that would ensure comprehensive justice regardless of which specific charges prosecutors chose to pursue. The involvement of his law firm colleague and additional professional accomplices had expanded the conspiracy into racketeering territory, potentially triggering federal organized crime statutes with enhanced penalties. The most immediate priority is obtaining emergency judicial orders that will freeze all assets and prevent completion of the planned transfers scheduled for next Tuesday, Rachel continued, indicating detailed court filings that had been prepared overnight. We have sufficient evidence to justify immediate asset preservation orders, but we need to balance speed against the risk of alerting the defendants before we can secure additional evidence and coordinate with federal investigators. Patricia Williams presented her forensic accounting analysis, which had revealed the complete scope of financial manipulation and theft that extended far beyond my inheritance into systematic embezzlement that had been occurring over the past 18 months. The financial evidence documented unauthorized transfers totaling over $400,000, including funds from our joint accounts, business revenues from my graphic design practice, and investment accounts that Marcus had managed without my knowledge. The pattern of financial transfers reveals sophisticated planning that began long before your great-aunt's inheritance arrived, Patricia explained, her charts and graphs providing visual representation of the systematic theft. Marcus has been positioning himself to control all financial resources while creating the appearance of normal joint financial management. The inheritance simply accelerated his timeline and provided the final component for his planned disappearance. The forensic analysis had also revealed that Marcus's activities involved potential embezzlement from his law firm's client accounts, suggesting criminal liability that could result in institutional prosecution and professional sanctions that would destroy his legal career regardless of the outcome of charges related to my case. The evidence suggested that my situation represented only one component of a broader criminal enterprise that victimized multiple individuals and institutions. Maria Santos presented surveillance evidence that had documented the complete network of accomplices and professional services that facilitated Marcus's criminal activities. The investigation had identified 6 additional participants, including financial advisors, real estate professionals, and legal consultants who had provided services that enabled complex asset transfers and identity creation activities. The surveillance evidence demonstrates that this conspiracy involves professional criminal organization that extends far beyond marital betrayal, Maria explained, her photographs and documentation revealing the scope of coordination and planning. Several of the participants have previous criminal histories involving financial fraud, suggesting that Marcus has engaged professional criminals rather than simply involving naive accomplices. The intelligence confirmed that immediate law enforcement coordination would be necessary to address the full scope of the criminal enterprise and prevent additional victims from suffering financial losses. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit had been briefed on the case and was prepared to initiate federal investigation that would provide resources and authority beyond what state and local agencies could offer. The legal strategy that emerged from the team meeting involved coordinated civil and criminal actions that would freeze assets immediately, while building comprehensive prosecution cases against all participants in the conspiracy. The approach would ensure that Marcus and his accomplices faced maximum legal consequences while providing complete asset recovery and financial restitution for all victims. Elena, you need to understand that once we initiate legal action, your life will change dramatically and permanently, Rachel Morrison emphasized as the meeting concluded. Marcus will be arrested and charged with multiple felonies, your marriage will effectively end, and you will become the primary witness in federal criminal proceedings that could last for months or years. The psychological preparation for this transition was as important as the legal and financial planning. The woman who had discovered Marcus's betrayal 1 week earlier had been focused on understanding and responding to immediate threats. The woman preparing to initiate comprehensive legal action possessed the strategic mindset and professional support necessary to navigate complex criminal proceedings while rebuilding her life on foundations of independence and justice. The afternoon was spent finalizing legal documentation and coordinating with federal investigators who would execute search warrants and asset seizure orders simultaneously with the filing of civil complaints and criminal charges. The precision required for this coordination demanded careful timing that would prevent any advance warning that might allow the defendants to destroy evidence or transfer additional assets. The most challenging aspect of the preparation was maintaining normal behavior patterns with Marcus, while knowing that within 24 hours, federal agents would be arresting him and seizing all assets involved in his criminal activities. The psychological demands of this deception required every aspect of the strategic discipline I had developed over the past week. Marcus returned home that evening displaying unusual tension and preoccupation that suggested potential awareness of increased risk or timeline pressure related to his criminal activities. His behavior included frequent phone calls conducted in private areas of the house and repeated checking of financial account balances and investment portfolios, suggesting possible concern about detection or interference with his planned activities. "Elena, I need to discuss some changes in our weekend plans," Marcus announced during dinner, his tone carrying unusual formality that suggested carefully prepared communication. "I have been asked to attend urgent meetings on Saturday that involve time-sensitive legal matters requiring immediate attention." The reference to urgent meetings suggested that Marcus's criminal timeline was accelerating, potentially in response to external pressures or opportunities that required modified planning. The formality of his communication suggested that he was preparing me for extended absence or significant changes in our normal interaction patterns. "Of course, Marcus, I understand that your professional responsibilities sometimes require schedule adjustments," I replied, maintaining supportive understanding while internally processing the intelligence implications of his announcement. "Will these meetings affect your availability for the remainder of the weekend, or should I expect that Sunday will allow for normal personal time together?" Marcus's hesitation before responding provided additional confirmation that his plans involved more than simple schedule modifications. "Sunday should be available for personal time, but there may be some follow-up activities early next week that could require significant attention and potentially some travel," he explained, his language suggesting careful avoidance of specific details that might reveal the true nature of his activities. The reference to potential travel was particularly significant, given that the property acquisitions I had discovered included a resort location that could serve as a relocation destination after completion of his asset theft. His mention of early week activities aligned perfectly with the Tuesday timeline for final asset transfers that I had discovered in his documents. The evening proceeded with our established routine of separate activities in shared space, but I observed increased anxiety in Marcus's behavior that suggested growing pressure or concern about potential risks to his criminal plans. His phone usage became more frequent and secretive, with conversations conducted outside of my hearing range and text messaging that required immediate attention regardless of our activities. Most significantly, Marcus spent considerable time reviewing financial documents and online account information, suggesting possible preparation for immediate asset access or transfer activities that might be triggered by emergency circumstances. His behavior indicated that he was prepared to accelerate his criminal timeline if circumstances required immediate action to protect his interests. The psychological challenge of maintaining normal interaction with Marcus, while knowing that federal agents were preparing to arrest him within hours, was profound and transformative. Every conversation required strategic analysis of information, security, and emotional control that continued to develop capabilities I had never needed previously. However, the most remarkable aspect of this experience was the recognition that I felt no sympathy or regret about the consequences Marcus would face as a result of his criminal activities. The woman who had trusted him completely 1 week earlier might have experienced guilt or sadness about his impending arrest and prosecution. The woman who understood the complete scope of his betrayal and criminal planning felt only satisfaction that justice would be served with precision and completeness. The transformation from victim to strategic prosecutor represented fundamental changes in my understanding of personal strength, professional capabilities, and moral clarity that would influence every aspect of my future life and relationships. The betrayal that was intended to destroy my financial security and emotional stability had instead revealed inner resources and intellectual capabilities that exceeded my previous self-assessment. As I prepared for sleep on what would be Marcus's final night in our home, I reflected on the remarkable journey that had transformed a shocking discovery into comprehensive strategic response, The evidence of his betrayal had initially created confusion and emotional devastation, but systematic investigation and professional collaboration had converted that evidence into the foundation for justice and personal empowerment. The legal trap that would spring tomorrow morning had been constructed through careful planning, professional expertise, and strategic discipline that demonstrated the power of responding to betrayal with intelligence rather than emotion. Marcus's sophisticated criminal conspiracy would become the instrument of his own destruction, while providing me with the foundation for independence and success that exceeded anything I had previously imagined possible. Saturday morning would bring federal agents, search warrants, asset seizures, and criminal arrests that would transform Marcus from successful attorney to federal defendant facing decades in prison. The conspiracy that he had designed to steal my inheritance and abandon our marriage would instead provide prosecutors with evidence for comprehensive criminal cases that would ensure complete justice for all victims. The woman who would wake up tomorrow morning possessed strategic capabilities, professional relationships, and personal strength that had been forged through the most challenging week of her life. The betrayal that was intended to leave her helpless and financially devastated had instead created someone capable of orchestrating complex legal responses while building foundations for future success that were based on competence, independence, and moral clarity. Marcus had underestimated not only my intelligence and resilience, but also the resources and expertise available to individuals who refuse to accept victimization and choose instead to pursue justice through systematic and strategic action. His assumption that I would remain passive and uninformed had provided the time and access necessary to build comprehensive evidence while developing capabilities that would ensure his criminal activities became the foundation of his own comprehensive destruction. The legal trap was set with precision that would ensure complete success. Tomorrow would begin the final phase of transformation, from betrayed wife to empowered individual, who had converted devastating personal crisis into the catalyst for achieving justice, while building a foundation for independence and future success that was based on personal strength rather than dependence on others' honesty or loyalty. If you believe in the power of strategic thinking and the importance of fighting for justice when facing betrayal, subscribe now to witness how truth and preparation can triumph over deception and criminal planning. The moment of reckoning was approaching, and Marcus had no idea that his carefully planned conspiracy was about to become the foundation of justice rather than the instrument of theft and abandonment he had intended. Saturday morning arrived with the deceptive calm that precedes seismic events, the kind of quiet that masks the precise coordination of federal law enforcement operations designed to dismantle criminal enterprises while preserving evidence and protecting victims. At precisely 6:30, while Marcus remained asleep beside me, my phone vibrated with a text message from attorney Rachel Morrison containing the single word that confirmed the initiation of coordinated legal action across multiple jurisdictions. The message read simply "Sunrise," the predetermined code indicating that federal agents had begun executing search warrants at Marcus's law firm, his accomplice's residence, and the various financial institutions that had facilitated the criminal conspiracy. Within the next 4 hours, the sophisticated criminal enterprise that Marcus had spent months constructing would be systematically dismantled by professionals whose expertise in financial crimes investigation exceeded his legal knowledge and criminal planning capabilities. I rose from bed with careful attention to maintaining normal morning routines, understanding that the next several hours would require the most sophisticated performance of my entire intelligence operation. Marcus needed to remain unaware of the coordinated legal action until federal agents arrived at our residence with arrest warrants and asset seizure orders that would prevent any possibility of evidence destruction or emergency asset transfers. The challenge of maintaining normal behavior while federal agents simultaneously executed search warrants at locations throughout the city demanded psychological control and strategic discipline that utilized every aspect of the capabilities I had developed over the previous week. The woman who had discovered Marcus's initial betrayal would have been overwhelmed by the complexity and emotional intensity of coordinating such comprehensive legal response. The woman preparing coffee while federal operations proceeded around the city possessed the strategic mindset and professional coordination skills necessary to ensure optimal outcomes for all aspects of the legal intervention. Marcus awakened at 7:15 with his typical Saturday morning routine, displaying no awareness that his criminal conspiracy was being systematically exposed and documented by federal investigators operating at his professional and personal locations. His behavior appeared normal and relaxed, suggesting complete confidence that his criminal activities remained undetected and would proceed according to his established timeline. "Good morning, darling," Marcus said, entering the kitchen with the casual affection that had characterized our weekend mornings throughout our marriage. "I hope you slept well, because today might be somewhat busy with the meetings I mentioned yesterday evening." The irony of his concern for my sleep quality, expressed while federal agents were gathering evidence of his systematic betrayal and theft, represented the profound psychological disconnection that enabled him to maintain the facade of devoted husband while implementing criminal plans designed to destroy my financial security and abandon our marriage. "I slept quite well, thank you," I replied, maintaining the warm domestic interaction that had been our pattern while internally calculating the timeline for federal agent arrival and arrest procedures. "Will your meetings require you to leave early this morning, or do we have time for normal breakfast together?" Marcus's response provided final confirmation of his timeline and immediate plans while demonstrating his continued complete ignorance of the legal action that was rapidly approaching our residence. "The first meeting is not scheduled until 10 o'clock, so we have plenty of time for breakfast and normal morning activities," he explained, his tone carrying the satisfaction of someone whose criminal plans were proceeding according to expectations. The reference to normal morning activities carried particular significance, given that within 2 hours, federal agents would transform our home into a crime scene where evidence collection and suspect apprehension would replace domestic routine. Marcus's expectation of normalcy demonstrated the effectiveness of my operational security and the complete success of maintaining strategic deception throughout the intelligence gathering phase. At 8:30, while Marcus showered and prepared for what he believed would be criminal meetings designed to complete his theft of my inheritance, I received the second coordinated communication from my legal team confirming successful execution of the initial phase of federal operations. Patricia Williams sent a brief message indicating that forensic accountants were already analyzing financial records seized from the law firm, while Maria Santos confirmed that surveillance evidence had been coordinated with federal investigators who were documenting the complete network of criminal accomplices. The precision and effectiveness of the coordinated operation exceeded even my most optimistic expectations for legal intervention. The federal response demonstrated the sophisticated resources and professional expertise that became available when criminal activities crossed jurisdictional boundaries and involved multiple victims and institutional fraud. Marcus's assumption that his legal knowledge would protect him from consequences had proven completely inadequate when confronted with federal law enforcement capabilities that specialized in complex financial crimes. At 9:15, Marcus emerged from our bedroom dressed in his most expensive suit and carrying the leather briefcase that contained documents related to his criminal activities. His appearance and demeanor suggested preparation for important business meetings, where significant decisions would be made and substantial outcomes would be determined. His confidence and satisfaction indicated complete belief that his criminal conspiracy would achieve the intended objectives of asset theft and relationship abandonment. "Elena, I may be gone for most of the day, depending on how these meetings develop," Marcus announced, his tone carrying the mixture of professional importance and personal regret that had characterized his behavior throughout the period of his criminal planning. "These matters are quite complex and may require extended discussions and careful documentation." The reference to careful documentation was particularly ironic, given that federal agents were simultaneously documenting his criminal activities with precision that would ensure comprehensive prosecution and maximum criminal penalties. His concern about extended discussions would prove prophetic, although the discussions would occur in federal custody rather than criminal conspiracy meetings. "I understand that important business matters sometimes require extended attention," I replied, maintaining supportive understanding while internally preparing for the dramatic transformation that would occur within minutes of his planned departure. "I hope your meetings proceed successfully and achieve the outcomes you have been working toward." The expression of hope for successful outcomes carried layers of meaning that Marcus could not perceive. His criminal conspiracy would indeed achieve outcomes, although those outcomes would involve federal prosecution, asset forfeiture, and decades of imprisonment, rather than the luxury lifestyle and relationship freedom he had planned. At 9:45, Marcus collected his briefcase and moved toward the garage entrance, displaying the confident stride of someone who believed his criminal activities had succeeded in achieving their intended objectives without detection or interference. His farewell kiss carried what appeared to be genuine affection, representing either complete psychological compartmentalization or sophisticated manipulation designed to maintain my emotional attachment until his planned abandonment could be implemented. The moment Marcus's vehicle cleared our driveway, I positioned myself at the front window where I could observe the arrival of federal agents while maintaining communication with my legal team about timing and coordination of the arrest and asset seizure procedures. The transition from intelligence operation to legal intervention required precise timing that would ensure optimal evidence preservation and prevent any possibility of flight or asset concealment. At exactly 10 o'clock, 3 black SUVs arrived simultaneously at our residence, their coordinated approach indicating professional law enforcement operation rather than routine investigation or inquiry. The vehicles discharged 12 federal agents wearing protective equipment and carrying search warrants, asset seizure orders, and arrest documentation that would transform Marcus from successful attorney to federal defendant within the next several hours. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh, the lead investigator for the FBI Financial Crimes Unit, approached our front door with the authoritative bearing of someone whose professional experience included numerous similar operations involving sophisticated financial fraud and criminal conspiracy. Her presentation of credentials and legal documentation was methodical and comprehensive, ensuring that all procedures would withstand subsequent legal scrutiny and appeal processes. Mrs. Vasquez, I am Special Agent Walsh with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, she announced, her tone carrying professional courtesy combined with serious authority. We have federal warrants for the search of these premises and the seizure of assets related to an ongoing investigation of financial fraud and criminal conspiracy. We also have arrest warrants for Marcus Castellanos in connection with multiple federal charges involving identity theft, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit racketeering. The moment represented the culmination of my transformation from betrayed victim to strategic prosecutor, whose intelligence gathering and professional coordination had provided federal authorities with evidence sufficient to justify comprehensive legal action against a sophisticated criminal enterprise. The warrants and legal documentation represented validation of every aspect of my investigation and strategic response to Marcus's betrayal. Agent Walsh, I am prepared to provide complete cooperation with your investigation and have been working with legal counsel to ensure that all relevant evidence is available for your examination, I replied, maintaining professional composure while internally experiencing profound satisfaction that justice was being implemented with precision and completeness. The search of our residence proceeded with systematic thoroughness that documented every aspect of Marcus's criminal activities, while preserving evidence according to federal standards that would ensure admissibility in subsequent criminal proceedings. The agent's expertise in financial crimes investigation revealed additional evidence that I had not discovered during my own intelligence gathering, including hidden communication devices and encrypted document storage that suggested even more sophisticated criminal planning than I had identified. The discovery of Marcus's hidden safe concealed behind false panels in his office wall revealed the complete scope of his criminal enterprise and confirmed that my situation represented only one component of systematic fraud that had victimized numerous individuals and institutions over the past several years. The safe contained forged identity documents, offshore account information, and detailed records of embezzlement from his law firm's client accounts that documented criminal activities totaling over $2 million. Agent Walsh's analysis of the evidence confirmed that Marcus's criminal conspiracy warranted federal prosecution under organized crime statutes that carried potential sentences of life imprisonment without parole. The systematic nature of his fraud, the multiple victims involved, and the sophisticated planning demonstrated criminal enterprise that exceeded simple financial theft and entered territory typically associated with professional criminal organizations. Mrs. Vasquez, the evidence we have discovered confirms that your situation involves sophisticated criminal enterprise that has affected numerous victims over an extended period, Agent Walsh explained as the search proceeded. Your intelligence gathering and evidence preservation have been instrumental in enabling us to document the complete scope of these criminal activities and identify all participants in the conspiracy. The federal investigation had also revealed that Marcus's law firm colleague, identified as attorney Sarah Mitchell, had been operating similar schemes targeting other wealthy clients of the firm, using her position to identify potential victims and coordinate asset theft with Marcus and other criminal accomplices. The scope of their criminal enterprise exceeded individual relationship betrayal and represented systematic exploitation of professional positions for personal enrichment through fraud and theft. At 11:30, federal agents coordinating the operation across multiple locations confirmed that Marcus had been arrested at the offices of Continental Financial Services, where he had arrived expecting to finalize asset transfers that would complete his theft of my inheritance. The arrest had been coordinated with seizure of additional evidence and assets, including the luxury vehicles he had purchased using stolen funds and the financial accounts he had established under false identities. The arrest report indicated that Marcus had initially attempted to claim legal privilege and professional immunity, apparently believing that his legal credentials would provide protection from federal prosecution for financial crimes. His surprise and confusion upon arrest suggested complete shock that his criminal activities had been discovered and documented, confirming the effectiveness of my operational security throughout the intelligence gathering process. Sarah Mitchell had been arrested simultaneously at her residence, where federal agents had discovered additional evidence of the criminal conspiracy, including detailed victim profiles, forged legal documents, and communication records that documented coordination of systematic fraud over the past 3 years. Her arrest had been accompanied by seizure of luxury assets purchased with stolen funds, including jewelry, artwork, and real estate, that represented the proceeds of numerous criminal schemes. The coordinated arrests and asset seizures had also resulted in charges against 4 additional accomplices who had provided professional services that facilitated the criminal conspiracy. These individuals included financial advisors, real estate agents, and document specialists who had knowingly participated in identity theft and asset transfer activities in exchange for substantial fees paid from stolen funds. By noon, the federal operation had achieved complete success in dismantling the criminal enterprise, while preserving all evidence necessary for comprehensive prosecution of all participants. The precision and coordination of the law enforcement response had prevented any possibility of evidence destruction, asset concealment, or flight by the defendants, ensuring that justice would be served with maximum effectiveness. The transformation of our residence from domestic space to federal crime scene represented the physical manifestation of my personal transformation from betrayed victim to empowered individual whose strategic response had achieved comprehensive justice. The evidence collection and documentation procedures confirmed that every aspect of Marcus's betrayal had been exposed and would result in appropriate legal consequences. As federal agents concluded their search and evidence collection activities, Agent Walsh provided me with detailed information about the legal proceedings that would follow, including my role as primary victim and witness in federal criminal cases that would likely result in decades of imprisonment for all participants in the conspiracy. Mrs. Visoas, I want you to understand that your intelligence gathering and strategic response have enabled us to achieve complete success in exposing and prosecuting this criminal enterprise, Agent Walsh concluded. Your courage and determination in the face of systematic betrayal have ensured that justice will be served while preventing additional victims from suffering financial losses. The day of reckoning had achieved every objective of my strategic response while exceeding my expectations for comprehensive justice and asset recovery. Marcus's sophisticated criminal conspiracy had been systematically dismantled by federal authorities, whose expertise and resources had converted his betrayal into the foundation of his own complete destruction. The woman who would spend that evening in a home that was finally free from deception and criminal activity possessed strategic capabilities, professional relationships, and personal strength that had been forged through the most challenging and transformative week of her life. The betrayal that was intended to leave her helpless had instead created someone capable of orchestrating complex legal responses while building foundations for future success based on competence, independence, and moral clarity. The immediate aftermath of the federal operation transformed my residence from an active crime scene into a sanctuary of justice, where comprehensive evidence preservation had ensured that every aspect of Marcus's criminal conspiracy would face appropriate legal consequences. The silence that followed the departure of federal agents carried profound significance, representing not emptiness but rather the complete absence of deception and criminal activity that had contaminated my home environment for months without my awareness. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh remained at my residence for an additional 2 hours after the primary search operation concluded, conducting detailed interviews that would establish my role as primary victim and key witness in the federal criminal proceedings that would determine the ultimate consequences for all participants in the conspiracy. Her questions were methodical and comprehensive, designed to document the complete timeline of my discovery process while establishing the legal foundation for asset recovery and victim restitution procedures. Mrs. Vasquez, the evidence we have collected today confirms that you have been the victim of systematic financial crimes that warrant complete asset recovery and substantial restitution beyond the direct theft of your inheritance. Agent Walsh explained, her analysis based on preliminary examination of the documents and electronic records seized during the search operation. The federal charges we will be pursuing carry mandatory restitution requirements that will ensure you recover not only your stolen assets but also compensation for the damages and losses you have suffered as a result of this criminal conspiracy. The scope of asset recovery exceeded my most optimistic expectations for financial restitution, encompassing not only the theft of my inheritance and joint assets but also compensation for professional losses, emotional damages, and punitive awards that would reflect the severity of the crimes committed against me. The federal investigation had revealed that Marcus's criminal activities had generated substantial proceeds that would be subject to forfeiture and distribution to victims according to established legal procedures. Agent Walsh provided detailed information about the federal asset forfeiture process, which would freeze all assets purchased with stolen funds, while legal proceedings determined appropriate distribution to victims and recovery of criminal proceeds. The luxury vehicles, real estate properties, investment accounts, and personal property that Marcus had acquired through his criminal activities would be systematically evaluated and distributed according to victim losses and legal restitution requirements. The federal investigation has identified assets with a total value exceeding $3 million that were acquired through criminal activities documented in this case. Agent Walsh continued, her analysis based on preliminary financial records examination. These assets will be subject to forfeiture proceedings that will ensure complete recovery of stolen funds while providing additional compensation for the damages you and other victims have suffered. The magnitude of asset recovery reflected the comprehensive scope of Marcus's criminal enterprise, which had extended far beyond my individual case to encompass systematic fraud affecting numerous victims over several years. The federal investigation had revealed that his law firm position had provided access to wealthy clients whose assets became targets for sophisticated theft schemes implemented through forged documents, unauthorized transactions, and identity manipulation similar to the methods used against me. The afternoon brought detailed coordination meetings with my legal team, where attorney Rachel Morrison, forensic accountant Patricia Williams, and private investigator Maria Santos analyzed the federal evidence and developed comprehensive strategies for civil asset recovery that would supplement the criminal restitution proceedings. The combination of federal criminal prosecution and civil litigation would ensure maximum financial recovery while establishing legal precedents that would protect future victims from similar criminal schemes. Elena, the federal evidence has exceeded our most comprehensive expectations for documenting the scope and systematic nature of the criminal conspiracy, Rachel Morrison explained during our strategy session. The discovery of multiple victims and institutional fraud has transformed this case from individual financial crime into federal racketeering prosecution that carries potential life imprisonment sentences for all primary participants. The legal analysis revealed that Marcus would face federal charges including conspiracy to commit racketeering, money laundering, identity theft, mail fraud, wire fraud, and organized criminal enterprise activity. The cumulative potential sentences for these charges exceeded 50 years in federal prison, with mandatory minimum terms that would ensure substantial incarceration regardless of plea negotiation or cooperation with federal prosecutors. Sarah Mitchell, Marcus's primary accomplice, faced similar federal charges along with additional counts related to professional misconduct and client fraud that would result in permanent disbarment and potential civil liability to the law firm and affected clients. Her participation in systematic client fraud had exposed the law firm to substantial institutional liability and regulatory sanctions that would likely result in dissolution of the practice and additional criminal investigations. Patricia Williams presented her forensic analysis of the complete financial records, which had revealed the sophisticated money laundering operation that Marcus had implemented to conceal stolen assets and create the appearance of legitimate business income. The analysis documented systematic use of shell companies, offshore accounts, and fraudulent investment vehicles that had enabled him to process stolen funds while avoiding detection by financial institutions and regulatory agencies. The money laundering operation demonstrates criminal sophistication that exceeds typical financial fraud and enters territory associated with organized crime enterprises, Patricia explained, her charts and documentation revealing the complex financial structures that had facilitated the criminal conspiracy. The federal investigation has identified connections to established criminal networks that provided professional services for asset concealment and identity creation. The discovery of connections to organized criminal networks had elevated the federal investigation to involve multiple law enforcement agencies with expertise in complex criminal enterprises. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit had been joined by Treasury Department investigators, Postal Inspection Service specialists, and federal prosecutors from the Organized Crime Division, who possessed resources and experience necessary for comprehensive prosecution of sophisticated criminal operations. Maria Santos provided intelligence analysis that had documented the complete network of criminal accomplices and professional services that had facilitated Marcus's conspiracy. Her investigation had identified 12 individuals who had provided knowing assistance to the criminal enterprise, including attorneys, accountants, real estate professionals, and financial advisors who would face federal charges related to their participation in money laundering and conspiracy activities. The intelligence operation you conducted provided crucial evidence that enabled federal investigators to identify and document the complete criminal network, Maria explained, her presentation highlighting the strategic value of my systematic evidence gathering. Your documentation of meetings, communications, and activities provided the foundation for surveillance operations that captured additional criminal activities and expanded the scope of federal prosecution. The recognition that my intelligence gathering had contributed to exposing a sophisticated criminal network affecting numerous victims provided profound validation for the strategic approach I had developed in response to Marcus's betrayal. The systematic documentation and professional coordination that had initially been motivated by personal justice had evolved into comprehensive law enforcement operation that would protect future victims from similar criminal schemes. The evening brought the first opportunity for reflection on the remarkable transformation that had occurred in my life over the previous week. The federal operation had achieved complete success in exposing and prosecuting the criminal conspiracy, while providing comprehensive asset recovery that would restore my financial security and establish foundation for independent future success. However, the most significant outcome was not financial or legal, but rather personal. The discovery of Marcus's betrayal had initially created emotional devastation and confusion about my ability to recognize deception and protect my own interests. The successful strategic response had revealed intellectual capabilities, professional networking skills, and psychological resilience that exceeded my previous self-assessment and would influence every aspect of my future life and relationships. The psychological journey from trusting victim to strategic prosecutor had required development of analytical thinking, investigative capabilities, and coordination skills that represented fundamental expansion of my professional and personal competencies. The woman who had discovered Marcus's initial document forgery 1 week earlier possessed different capabilities and self-understanding than the woman who had orchestrated comprehensive federal prosecution of sophisticated criminal enterprise. The transformation was not simply reactive response to external crisis but rather proactive development of strategic thinking and professional relationships that would provide permanent foundation for independence and success. The betrayal that was intended to destroy my financial security and emotional stability had instead catalyzed personal growth that would enable achievements and contributions that exceeded my previous aspirations and limitations. The federal prosecution timeline would extend over the next 18 months, during which I would serve as primary witness in criminal proceedings while simultaneously pursuing civil litigation for additional damages and asset recovery. The legal proceedings would require sustained engagement with complex judicial processes, but my professional team had demonstrated expertise and dedication that would ensure optimal outcomes for all aspects of the case. The asset recovery process had already begun with federal seizure of Marcus's luxury vehicles, real estate properties, and financial accounts that contained proceeds from criminal activities. The preliminary valuation exceeded $2.5 million in assets that would be subject to forfeiture and victim restitution distribution, ensuring complete recovery of my stolen inheritance along with substantial additional compensation for damages and losses. The investigation had also revealed that Marcus's homeowner insurance policy contained coverage for criminal activities committed against family members, providing additional avenue for financial recovery that could supplement federal restitution awards. The insurance claim would be processed independently of criminal proceedings, potentially providing immediate financial resources, while federal asset forfeiture procedures were completed. More significantly, the federal investigation had attracted attention from civil rights organizations and victim advocacy groups, who recognized the case as representing systematic exploitation of trust relationships for financial gain. Several organizations had offered support for legislative initiatives that would strengthen legal protections for inheritance fraud victims and enhance criminal penalties for professionals who abuse client relationships for personal enrichment. The opportunity to contribute to legal and social reforms that would protect future victims provided meaningful purpose that extended beyond personal justice and financial recovery. The strategic response that had initially been motivated by individual survival and restitution had evolved into a platform for broader social contribution and systemic change that could prevent similar criminal schemes from affecting other individuals and families. As I concluded the first day following federal intervention, I recognized that the most profound transformation was internal rather than external. The discovery of Marcus's betrayal had initially challenged my ability to trust my own judgment and recognize deception in close relationships. The successful strategic response had revealed that my analytical capabilities and professional instincts were sophisticated and reliable when applied with systematic methodology and appropriate expert consultation. The psychological impact of achieving comprehensive justice through strategic planning and professional coordination had established confidence in my ability to navigate complex challenges, while building relationships based on competence and mutual respect, rather than dependency and emotional vulnerability. The experience had demonstrated that personal strength could be developed through crisis, and that betrayal could become the catalyst for discovering previously unknown capabilities and potential. The legal proceedings would continue for many months, but the strategic phase of my response was complete. Marcus's criminal conspiracy had been comprehensively exposed and would result in appropriate legal consequences, while asset recovery procedures would restore my financial security and provide foundation for independent future success. The transformation from victim to strategic prosecutor had been achieved through systematic effort and professional collaboration that demonstrated the power of responding to crisis with intelligence rather than emotion. The woman who would begin rebuilding her life tomorrow possessed strategic thinking capabilities, professional relationships, and personal strength that had been forged through the most challenging and transformative experience of her existence. The betrayal that was intended to leave her helpless and financially devastated had instead created someone capable of orchestrating complex legal responses, while contributing to social reforms that would protect others from similar exploitation and abuse. If you believe in the power of strategic thinking and the importance of transforming crisis into opportunity for growth and contribution, subscribe now to witness how comprehensive preparation and professional collaboration can achieve justice, while building foundations for future success that exceed previous limitations and expectations. The federal prosecution would ensure that Marcus's criminal conspiracy became the foundation of comprehensive justice, rather than the instrument of theft and abandonment he had intended. The transition from crisis management to strategic rebuilding required comprehensive evaluation of every aspect of my personal and professional life, ensuring that the foundation I constructed would reflect the capabilities and insights I had developed through the transformative experience of exposing Marcus's criminal conspiracy. The process demanded systematic analysis of financial resources, professional relationships, living arrangements, and long-term objectives that would establish sustainable independence while maximizing the opportunities created through my successful response to systematic betrayal. The first priority involved comprehensive financial planning that would utilize the asset recovery proceeds to establish diversified investment portfolios and business opportunities that would provide long-term security while supporting continued professional development. Patricia Williams, whose forensic accounting expertise had been instrumental in documenting Marcus's crimes, agreed to serve as my ongoing financial advisor, providing the specialized knowledge necessary to manage substantial assets while protecting against future fraud or exploitation. Elena, the asset recovery from the federal investigation will provide you with financial resources that exceed most individuals' lifetime earnings, Patricia explained during our comprehensive financial planning session. The key to long-term success involves strategic allocation of these resources across multiple investment categories, while establishing business foundations that will generate ongoing income independent of traditional employment relationships. The preliminary asset recovery analysis indicated that my total financial position would exceed $4 million once federal forfeiture proceedings were completed and civil litigation settlements were finalized. This substantial sum included not only recovery of my stolen inheritance and joint assets but also punitive damages, emotional distress compensation, and proceeds from Marcus's criminal enterprise that would be distributed to victims according to federal restitution guidelines. Patricia recommended establishing a diversified investment strategy that would include real estate holdings, equity portfolios, bond investments, and alternative assets that would provide stable returns while protecting against market volatility and inflation erosion. The approach emphasized capital preservation and steady growth rather than speculative investments that could jeopardize the financial security I had fought to protect and recover. More significantly, Patricia suggested that my demonstrated analytical capabilities and strategic thinking skills represented valuable professional assets that could be developed into consulting services for individuals and organizations facing complex fraud investigations or strategic crisis management challenges. The expertise I had developed through necessity could become the foundation for a consulting practice that would provide meaningful work while generating substantial professional income. The second critical component of strategic rebuilding involved evaluation of my living arrangements and geographic location, considering both practical security concerns and optimal positioning for professional opportunities that would utilize my newly developed capabilities. The residence I had shared with Marcus carried psychological associations with deception and betrayal that would impede the emotional healing necessary for optimal future performance and relationship development. Maria Santos, whose private investigation expertise had been crucial to documenting the criminal conspiracy, provided security analysis and recommendations for residential arrangements that would ensure personal safety while supporting professional activities and social relationships. Her assessment indicated that relocation to a different geographic area would provide optimal conditions for establishing new professional identity while maintaining appropriate distance from the legal proceedings and media attention associated with the federal prosecution. Elena, your successful exposure of this criminal conspiracy has attracted significant attention from law enforcement agencies, victim advocacy organizations, and media outlets interested in financial crime prevention, Maria explained during our security consultation. Strategic relocation will provide privacy and security while positioning you for professional opportunities that could utilize your analytical capabilities and crisis management experience. Maria recommended consideration of several metropolitan areas that offered strong professional networks, educational institutions, and business environments that would support consulting practice development while providing cultural and social opportunities that would facilitate personal growth and relationship building. The analysis emphasized locations with established legal and financial professional communities, where my expertise would be valued, and where professional networking would provide ongoing career development opportunities. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.